Today's going to be a pretty spooky and heavy show. We're going to be welcoming Mr. John Zaffis in just a moment. We're going to be talking about demonology. And John Zaffis is one of the world's most renowned experts in the paranormal and has been working in this field for 30 plus years. And so we're going to be talking to him about all aspects of demonology. What truly are demons? Where do they originate? How do they possess or oppress humanity? Where do they come from? Why do they want to mess with our lives so heavily? So
groups out there, a lot of different clergy all over the place. So my path actually took me down this road where I get involved mainly just with negative cases today.
Wow. And do you receive, a lot of email and calls each week? I mean, it seems like this subject has taken on a popularity. I mean, it's always had its place on the bookshelves of stores and the occasional television special, and occasionally you hear something about it on the radio or in the newspapers. But these days, it's very, very popular.
It's actually exploded.
Yes. So what would you do? You think there's more of this activity, or do you just think there's more knowledge of it amongst people and more curiosity about it?
I think it's a combination of a lot of different things. The radio shows, the TV shows, the exposure to the internet, the interest is at an all-time high. People are very interested and they're very curious. And people look at things a lot more openly today, I think, than they ever did before. In the U.S., we always kept this very shunned. It was very quiet. People really didn't talk about it. Where over in the other countries, it was things that were always discussed and always brought forth. But now, like I said, over the past year to 2 years, if you ever said something to me 5 years ago about seeing where demonology and these demon-type situations would be so much in the forefront, I would have never believed it.
Wow. Well, when I was doing some research on demons, because one of the first things that I was beginning to wonder about, I grew up in a kind of typical Protestant nature, and it's like I'm not an overtly religious person at this point. I'm a spiritual person, but I began to think, okay, well, what is the nature of demons? And I mean, how many are there? Where are they coming from? And one of the things that surprised me when I was reading some of the work about you is that you would deal with folks in these religious fields, be it priests or bishops or whatever, and they would be preaching the gospel, 7 days a week, but when it came to the subject of actual demons, they weren't really believers in that part of it.
Well, we still have that stigma today, where a lot of your clergy members, and it's just not Roman Catholic, it's Protestant and rabbis, it goes right across the board, where when dealing with it on a negative perspective, a lot of them would rather not even go into that area. They want to focus more on the positive and not give it the amount of recognition that is happening today. But unfortunately, guess what? Times have changed. And a lot of these things are being brought out into the forefront, where this whole world has been so secretive for so many years. It's just so different and viewed so differently right now that it's just something that I'm still even coming to terms with, that it's so much more out in the forefront.
Excuse me. Well, it's interesting to me because if one is going to talk about God and the New Testament, the Old Testament, and things like that, and we're going to talk about a devil and these type of fallen angels or demons, then, I mean, in a way it doesn't surprise me, in a way it does, that some of these clergy folk would not really want to touch that subject initially. And I was kind of wondering if, are they afraid of it, which, rightly they should be, or are they thinking it's affecting their credibility, or are they just not wanting to go down that dark way?
Well, unfortunately, it's all of the above.
Okay.
And a lot of people, especially your clergy members, they're not prepared. And a lot of them, weren't trained in the degree of understanding what people go through if they have an infestation within their home or they're being oppressed with these types of situations, what they should do, how they should handle it. So that's a very difficult thing. I've seen ministers actually do deliverance and deliverance prayers and clearings where they're a lot more let's say, knowledgeable, if you will, and willing to jump in and do those types of things than I've actually seen Roman Catholic priests do.
Well, I'll tell you what, you guys, we're speaking with John Zaffis. We are talking about demons and demonology. We're going to take a quick break. My name is Michael Parker. This is Dark Matter. When we come back, I'm going to ask John to kind of walk us through kind of Demons 101 and explain to us what they are. Because like I say, to my audience, I am learning with you today. And, wow, I'm getting excited about this show already. We'll be right back.
This is not a test. Dark Matter with Michael Parker. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Emma Caulfield, and you're listening to Dark Matter with Michael Parker.
That sounds like a perfect segue coming from a person who plays a demon on television. My name is Michael Parker. This is Dark Matter. We are speaking with John Zaffis today, a world-renowned paranormal investigator and demonologist. I just want to remind you guys, if you'd like to place a call and ask John or myself a question during the show today, it's 888-49-KARMA. And if you're listening to this archived in the future and you'd like to place a call, you still can, because just call the same number that I just gave you, 888-49-KARMA, follow the prompts, and we'll still be able to get to your question in the future if you don't get to do it today. But John, welcome back to the show. I was hoping that you could explain to our audience, because I was, for the past couple of days when reading about this, I'm finding a lot of information about demons, but based upon your 30 years in this field, could you kind of tell us what a demon is and what a demon is not, and what the difference between a demon and, say, just a ghost or apparition is?
Okay, I'll take the ghost apparition versus what a demon is.
Okay.
A ghost and apparition could have been a person. We call those human spirit, ghost, if you will, that could wander the earth, could come from a tragedy, a murder, suicide, these different types of souls, energy, or spirit, however you want to refer to it, could stay earthbound.
Mm-hmm.
And they could be lingering for unresolved issues, depending on, if it was a murder or something and they want that resolved. Battlefields and places like this. These are different types of areas that I refer to as human spirit. When we cross that line and we start talking in reference to deities or demons, these are the whole other area where when you refer to devils or demons or imps or anything like that, it's believed that they were cast out of heaven and, they fell by the wayside, didn't do what they were supposed to, according to a lot of the scriptures that have been written and the different things that have occurred with these. But I take that a step farther. When you're studying demonology, you can go back as far as recorded time goes, and your Egyptians, your pagans, and your different belief systems with all the different deities. So I look at this from a combination of, thousands of years of the different types of things that people perceived on a negative level. And today I believe a lot of these things with the deities and the demons and some of what people call negative energy, and these things intertwine with each other, and a lot of them work with each other, causing a lot of the different things to occur and happen, especially more so today than ever before.
Is that because we are subject to so many stresses and abuses in our life? Do we, from what I understand from some of your writings, the purpose of the demon is to wear us down over time. Does that mean that maybe there's more of them now than before, or are we more prone to being victim to them today?
I think really all of the above. Okay. I do feel that there is more in the forefront than there ever was before. There's more recognition given. There's more different types of practices and doors open to bring these things forth, if you will. And with the culture and society, with a lot of things, do I feel that these different types of entities or deities can attract more towards people than they did in the past? Absolutely. And there's just a total way of looking at this on how these things are affecting people, what is happening, the controversy with different things. And there's another thing that I've studied over the years, too. I do believe these things do go in cycles. And it just seems like there's this different terminology and different points in time that your negative perspective of this type of activity and how it affects human beings seems to escalate. You know, it could be, some people refer to it 7 years, 12 years, 10 years, but you'll see where it can build up, and you'll notice it, and it will reach its climax, then things will calm back down. But in 30 years, it is, and it's startling to me. And it's a fact of, you know, studying so many different things and being exposed to things and always hearing, you know, how so many things were interpreted in scriptures and things that were written, you know, hundreds and thousands of years ago, how scary it really is to see the parallels into what's happening in our world and to things that were written so many years ago. That's scary.
Yes, it is. Well, one of the things that I've heard from even people here in the studio, and people have asked me when they knew that I was going to do this show, is it's one thing for a fundamentalist Christian or person who is of a particular religious walk who believes in these types of things to exist, but what if I'm an agnostic or an atheist? Does the demon still have... I mean, I can guess what your answer may be, but we're curious, for a person whose belief system may not include demons, can the demon still affect that person who doesn't believe in the phenomena?
Okay, yes. Now, with this, when we're dealing with that, today, your organized religions are deteriorating. Not any particular one. All of them are deteriorating. And people are looking and searching beyond what we were brought up to believe in and interpret. When you're dealing with an individual, and this is continuous, where, you know, they have no organized religion, or a lot of people just don't believe in God, let alone devils and demons and all these other crazy things. But when they're affected and they got these things occurring and they're being attacked or they're being oppressed by certain information that's coming through to them, and once you're already ruled out as far as anything on a medical or a psychological perspective, you're left with what? You're searching and you're still looking. And I deal continuously with this, and people will talk to me, tell me what's happening with them. And a lot of times I'll make suggestions to them, you know, is it going to hurt to have your minister do prayers or a priest or a shaman to do prayers, and let's see if there's any difference. And a lot of times people say, well, there's nothing to lose by it. And with me, they're at least giving it, you know, the recognition and the opportunity to see that there could be something else that encompasses things. And many times people will say to me afterwards, John, now I got to rethink everything that I thought after going through all this.
I can see that. We're speaking with John Zaffis. We were talking about demonology, what they are, where they come from, how they affect us, and this is something that John, I have to admit, I have been reticent even to talk about this subject on the show before, because actually, I mean, I have a respect for it, and it does give me the creeps. So I'm learning along with the audience today. I guess one of the things that I would want to ask you is for a person who wants to guard themselves against oppression or eventual possession by a demon, what can one do to protect themselves and their family to try to fend off infestation by these entities?
One of your key things with any circumstances in a average type situation, always think positive, and always try to keep upbeat, and always look for the good within circumstances or within people. And that's a very hard thing for each and every one of us to do. But, you know, and my philosophy is I'm a paranormal investigator / demonologist, and I study everything. And if a person worships a 10-pound quartz crystal, I don't care. They're doing it on a positive.
Right.
And that's a positive force that they're trying to bring forth. I always tell people, focus in on that. If you do have things that are starting to occur, because a lot of these things that people go through and the oppression state and things like that, we have to stand firm on what we believe in. We have to stand firm in what is happening with our lives. So I'm a very strong believer in that. You have to take control of a lot of these situations personally and within your home to be able to help to break, whether you want to call it negative, a demon, a deity, whatever you want to call it. You have to be fully united, if it's a family you're dealing with, to be able to do that, to help break things and be able to stand back up on your 2 feet. And when you're dealing with anything, and any circumstances, whether it's human spirit or something on a negative level, if you can't see it, you can't touch it, it's one of the most scariest things for people.
Well, one of the things that I read that I also found interesting, and you said this right off the bat, I mean, these things do not wander around with a forked tail or cloved hoof. I mean, they primarily operate in invisibility. And what do you notice first when a person comes to you and they say, John, I believe I may be being affected by a demonic entity? What are some of the common signs that you'll see initially that might make you say, okay, I think this person might seriously have a demonic issue?
The normal circumstances that we deal with is usually the infestation. And when we say the infestation, that's when the environment is being affected, the household or the business area. You can have where people are extremely tired, they're exhausted, they're not concentrating on anything, they can't eat, they can't function, their personalities are starting to change, they're getting these thought processes that are coming through that they normally don't. Their whole environment, what they're interested in watching and reading, a lot of these things can start to actually change with these individuals. And that should throw up a red flag with a person when they're like, okay, why is this occurring and why is that happening? Now, these are a lot of the times where we get involved in the beginning stages. But when it goes past that and you go into the oppressive state, that's when the person really has something that is really giving it a strong hold. It turns that person against their friends, their family members. They're continuously arguing. The thought process changes. They're getting a lot of information that's coming through to them in their dream state. And what it does is it basically tries to wear down that individual so that they're just to a point where they're giving in of their free will and just saying, fine, take me over, do whatever you want, just stop tormenting me. That's when usually people end up falling victim to what we call possession.
Well, I see that we're already getting some questions on the website, but I want to wait to ask you some of these. When we move from that area from oppression to possession, and I know that you have been part of many exorcisms, if I'm looking at a person who has moved from the realm of oppression into possession, what am I going to see differently in this person? What is it going to look like to me as an outsider? What is their behavior going to change into? What are they going to be doing at this point if they are possessed?
There are several different categories that people can witness. Sometimes they'll get information from the past, the present, and the future.
Wow.
They can talk in some of the most craziest languages that, sometimes you can't even figure out some of these things. An enormous amount of strength. That's one of the most common things I've ever seen.
Superhuman strength. They can lift and fight people off?
Like it's nothing whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
These are just some of the characteristics that people witness. They can end up being bruised, bitten, and scratched in different areas where, they can't physically do it themselves. And when these things occur and these things start to happen, And these people are to that point where they can't figure out why it's happening, and they're just so petrified. These are some of the things that we look for. And very seldomly do these things occur in front of large groups of people. It can be witnessed by one or two people.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually the people that are closest to them.
Yes.
Now, that's when we have to get at that point, and we have to find out, okay, has this person had any medical conditions? Has there been any mental illness, a nervous breakdown, any trauma? And, if there has been any type of a trauma, this can trigger some of this stuff, and scientifically we realize that and we know that. But we go beyond that, and we try to figure out exactly what's happening, and are we going to have to take this to the next step? Are we dealing with the possibility that this person is genuinely possessed? Those are some of the characteristics that I would look for as being an investigator and looking for this type of situation.
Wow. Well, John, let's take a break. When we come back in a second, I want you to tell us what happens typically in an exorcism.
This is Lon Friend, author of Life on Planet Rock, and you're listening to Dark Matter with the one and only conscious rebel, Michael Parker, on Karma Air.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. My name is Michael Parker. This is Dark Matter, as always, coming to you on Sunday evenings. Today we are speaking with John Zaffis. We are talking about demons and demonology. And I want to remind you that you can send your comments to us on the karmaair.com site. Just hit that Contact Us Now and send in your comments. And John, we actually have two questions for you that I'd like to pose at the beginning of this segment that have come from two of our listeners. The first one is from Carolyn, and her question is, when a medium channels spirits that are supposed to be relatives distant or near, I have always had my doubts. Because if we go with the notion of reincarnation, our relatives or others have moved on, so I have suspected that it is some type of demon who is actually feeding the medium with personal info. What do you think?
I've studied reincarnation in past lives. I've worked with a lot of psychics and mediums that have channeled in deceased relatives. Do I always necessarily feel that it could be something on a negative level or a demon? No.
Good.
Okay. You have to be extremely guarded when dealing with these types of things. Can individuals be tricked? Yes, I do believe that can happen. But I'm a very firm believer that a lot of times our deceased loved ones or friends, at different points in time, can they try to get information across to us, and some of this information can come through a psychic or a medium? Absolutely. I'm a very firm believer in that.
Wow. Okay, good. The next question, this one comes from Phil, and I'm sorry, that previous question came from Carolyn. This question is from Phil. It says, if a demon is interested in a person, can the person ignore it, and will the demon lose interest if they do so long enough?
There have been situations where people have been tormented, and I've dealt with a lot of these people over the years where they've told me they've had some type of a demon or something negative that lingers around them. It follows them around, and they've kept up the battle for over a period of time and finally was able to get it to break.
Mm-hmm.
That's rare, but it does occur, and yes, it can happen that way.
Wow. Okay. I mean, that's good to hear that a person could triumph over a demon in the long term. I didn't know if that was possible. But I guess let's return to the subject of exorcisms. And a lot of people have seen the film The Exorcist, and they've read about exorcisms. But the ones that you have taken part in, I know that you've taken part in exorcisms, not only with people of the Catholic faith, but I mean, you've taken part in exorcisms with many different religions. Tell us a little bit, what is the common scenario in an exorcism process, and what might be different depending on which religions you are in?
Well, basically, they're all just about the same.
Okay.
Whether you're doing a deliverance or you're doing a exorcism, you're involved with it. It's the process of the clergy, if you will, coming in, preparing, setting up, and they start doing different prayers or different types of things. And what they're trying to do is actually bring forth whatever is inhabiting the individual.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're successful in bringing that forth, they can usually expel it from the individual. But usually your floor mat is basically the same type of thing. But when you're dealing with an individual that has a deity or a devil in them or a demon, whatever you want to call it, it is a process of where they're doing those prayers. And the more they get into them and the more that they call upon the positive, if you will, to be able to bring that forth, sometimes it can take longer or sometimes it can happen very quickly. So it depends on the circumstances of the situation. It depends on the strength of the clergy, and it also depends upon the person that is trying to be delivered or exorcised.
Now, a person who is in the process of being exorcised and is in possession, what level of consciousness are they at? I mean, are they aware of everything that's going on? Are they in kind of a hallucinogenic state? What type of frame of mind are they in?
The majority of the time when a person is truly, but I have seen some situations where people did remember some of the events and it was successful.
How many exorcisms have you been part of personally?
Hundreds.
Wow.
Hundreds.
I
used to keep count, and then finally I just gave up on it.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, have you felt in physical danger when you were part of these exorcisms?
It's an emotional trauma. You don't know what to expect. You don't know what's going to happen. And up to about a month and a half ago, I've never been physically hurt, but I was restraining an individual, and that person just happened to lunge and go at me the right way where they slammed me into a wall, and I ended up hurting my shoulder.
My goodness.
With the majority of the time, with dealing with that, you're usually very cautious where you're situating yourself when restraining an individual, so you try not to. But I think that the majority of it comes from being emotionally draining. And you don't know what to expect. You don't know what's going to happen. And it's just something that, you prepare yourself for. And to this day, I still do not like assisting and going to them. I really don't.
Right. No, I understand that. How do you prepare? How do you get yourself in a secure state of mind for this process?
With me, it's basically preparing myself as far as what I practice and the way I go about it with my prayers and the different perspectives from that level. I'm a very strong believer in bringing in the positive, the white light, and a lot of these different things to help protect myself.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you go into these types of situations very wide open and you're standing there and you're helping in these circumstances, you got to be very careful because they can and will gravitate right towards you if you're not prepared.
Right.
And you have to realize, even though you are prepared and you're geared up for anything that possibly can happen, you still can have energy that can attach to your energy or your aura, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you this. A person who's being exorcised, a person who is possessed, one of the things that I read that was interesting, and I wanted to ask you about this, that there could be anywhere, if it's a legion of demons, anywhere from 3 to 1,000 demons. Is there a typical amount of demons that is inhabiting a person at a time of possession? Is it usually just one very strong demon? Is it usually a whole legion of them? What do you usually find?
If we're dealing with possession, we're usually dealing with multiple. Wow. That could be within the individual, because they do bring in other ones also. So this is why a lot of times when an exorcism's performed, a lot of times the very first one isn't going to work. And the best way it got explained to me by a bishop many years ago was it's like taking an onion and just keep stripping it away to get to the center of it. That's what it's like with doing exorcisms. I've been involved with one case that took 4 years and 16 exorcisms to free a woman.
My God.
So sometimes you could have multiple exorcisms or deliverances sometimes that do need to be done. And even with me, it was a learning process. I just kept saying, why bother? You know, we keep doing it, and nothing seems to be successful. But, you know, your elders, if you will, are always very wise and intelligent people, and they've experienced these things over the years. And I've watched some of them do this repeatedly and finally be able to break what these individuals had endured.
We're speaking with John Zaffis. We're talking about exorcisms. We're talking about demonology, where demons come from, who do they inhabit, how does one rid themselves of them. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back right after the top of the hour. We're going to ask John some more questions. This is a really exciting show. Welcome back, Truth Seekers. My name is Michael Parker. This is Dark Matter. We are now entering our second hour of our Sunday evening show. We thank you all for joining us tonight. We are speaking with John Zaffis, world-renowned paranormal expert, investigator, and demonologist. And John, we've got a couple more questions for you. People love you. This one comes from Andrea. It says, I love the show Paranormal State. Ryan, the head of PRS, says that he can't say the name of the demon that's following him because it makes it more powerful. I'm curious as to why.
Bringing up the names of any of this with the demons or with the deities gives them a tremendous amount of recognition, and it gives them a lot of power to be able to enter in to other people's arena, so to speak. So this is one thing, you know, I never, ever bring up names, and I never discuss them no matter how hard somebody twists my arm. You have to be careful, but it's a hard thing for people to understand it if you've never really been exposed to any type of activity or around people that might have been into something in the paranormal realm or the occult end of it, and you've never experienced anything or have never seen anything or have anything to do with it. It's a hard thing to grasp and say that, hey, you know, I take this as a serious note. I take this as something that could be a tool that could open up things. So, you know, time and time again, I hear that, and that's not an unusual thing.
Well, we have another question for you. This comes from George, and this is actually a great segue because I was going to ask you about this later in the show, but here's the question. It says, what are the evil sounds that people hear in EVPs? And you might want to explain to some of the folks in the crowd who may not know what an EVP is as well.
Okay, an EVP, electronic voice phenomena. It takes a lot when you're dealing with your EVPs, especially now. Our theory, and I evolve as I go along in this work. You have to keep an open mind with it. You know, if you're hearing growlings or you're hearing certain monotone sounds are things that I look for. Those are key factors. And if you're dealing with something that is a continuous negative, you're getting continuous EVPs, I'm a little bit guarded with that. But my philosophy has changed over the years because years back, we used to think if you got anything that was swearing or hollering and, you know, these gutturally voices and everything like that, that we would always consider that something to be 100% negative. But we have to think with an open mind, and my philosophy today is if we're dealing with a human spirit, and that person was a mean, rotten, drunken type individual, they're going to be mean and rotten as it goes.
Right?
So, you know, I do try to keep an open mind, but the one thing that I keep my guard up with everything, especially today, is things can try to trick you, and they can try to fool you. So I'm very guarded with our EVPs, our psychic photography, people's experiences, and different things that occur.
Well, let me ask you this. Regarding the science of this and the tools that you use, when we're hearing an EVP, are you recording that just onto regular audio tape, or is this a WAV file? And what are we actually hearing when I guess I'm trying to explain something or ask you a question about something that I don't even fully understand. When you're recording this, where is this sound actually coming from?
Well, okay, there's so many different theories.
Okay.
Okay, what we used to believe in is back when we just had the cassette tapes and, our video cams and things like that, we felt that the energy was attracted to the magnetic material on these tapes.
Mm-hmm.
And then the theory gets blown out of the water. We come along with the digital age.
Sure.
And now we're still picking these up. We're still picking up these sounds or these voices and these different things. Is it so much that I feel that it's the equipment? No. I feel it's individuals. Certain people can get a bunch of EVPs like you can't believe, and other people don't get them at all. So it leads me more to think of the lines. My theory today is I think it's more the individuals using the equipment, the tape recorders and so on, that are picking up this energy because it's being attracted towards them, using their energy, and then coming out on the cassette players or what have you.
So the individual is in some form a conduit.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely. We are all conduits when we're dealing with this. We're all energy sources. So therefore, I'm a very firm believer that the spirit world needs our energy to be able to manifest and do different things and manipulate things.
Well, I guess it would be the same way when you're using the infrared camera, I guess. I mean, certain people might use that camera and not pick up images, but a person who's more conductive might, I guess.
Well, what the theory with that is that it shouldn't have an effect.
Okay.
Okay? The individuals that are using the equipment shouldn't have any boundaries with that. What's its intent and purpose of it. So here again, this is also new in our studies and the perceptions of the way we're using things, because you have to keep an open mind again. We set these camcorders up in different areas, and people are picking up things, and nobody's in that area. Do we have to keep that open mind where, okay, are they drawing the energy from people to...
Well, let me ask you this. You mentioned that she has a strong faith, which brings the question, why do demonic entities pick certain people that they want to attach themselves to? Because if this woman had this strong faith, and I'm assuming that you mean a Christian faith, and I'm assuming she was just a normal woman without some extraordinary job by which she could affect us all, say president or something like that. Why do demons pick certain people that they want to attach themselves to and torment, especially if it's going to take, well, here again, we just said that there's no time for them. Why do they pick certain people?
Usually when you're dealing with individuals, we will find 90% of the time, even a little bit higher, people have done something. They've opened up doors into the spirit world where these things afflict them, and they end up falling victim to these types of situations. Then we have the individuals, which is a very, very small fragment. We refer to them as soul victims. These type of people never got involved with anything. They led a halfway decent life, married, picket fence, the whole 9 yards.
Mm-hmm.
You can't find anything these people done wrong, and they end up falling victim to this. There is an extreme challenge for anything on a negative level to be able to gain control of that type of individual. They can get big brownie points for doing that.
Wait a minute. Okay, I'm not following. Restate that. Or you're saying you're saying that it's very difficult for the demonic negative entity to gain a foothold with this person, but if they do that, they get big points on the evil side?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Well, that's okay. Well, let me ask you this. When we're talking about a person who is now afflicted by numerous demons, possibly thousands, why are these demons working together against this single person? Are they also working together on other people, or are they simply working in tandem on this individual? How are they ganging up and doing this, or as best as you can figure?
You have different levels when you're dealing with anything on the negative level, and it starts off very, very low, where you just have these pesky little things that are running around causing trouble, and they work their way up. The more prominent and the more strength, the more destruction that you're dealing with, the hierarchy you're dealing with. It's the reverse of the choir of angels is the best way to describe this. So, a lot of them work in conjunction together on a negative just like they would on a positive. So therefore, the best way I can always describe it is it's like a gang. And they keep recruiting more and recruiting more till they can actually achieve what they set out to do.
Well, we just got an interesting question, and this kind of ties into this. This is posted by Carl, and this individual asks, can people's souls become demons in the afterlife?
What ends up happening in these types of situations, it's something that we try to understand what the end result is going to be. If you're dealing with a situation that a person gave into these things, they were practicing a lot of things, what ends up happening with the particular soul with that? Is it a situation that they are redeemed and looking at it from the demonic perspective, and you look at it from a religious perspective, is it a forgiving type situation with some of these things that these individuals have done through the course of their lives, willingly or unwillingly? It's one of those magical things that we're all trying to figure out. But we strive and we always hope that we all make errors. We're all human. Mm-hmm. And my philosophy is that, at the end, when you're judged, were you influenced by something? Did something interfere there? So I look at this very openly and hope that the end result is that, it's a forgiving type situation, and, that soul or that spirit can cross over to where it properly needs to be.
I like that.